A Fox News alert. We are continuing to follow the momentous events that took place on a baseball field in Virginia at about 9 minutes after 7 when gunshots rang out there. Security in Washington is on high alert. Armed Secret Service agents are out in force at the White House. Pedestrians have been cleared from Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the building. President Trump responding to the shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise earlier this morning. He took to Twitter saying, Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a true friend and patriot, was badly injured but will fully recover. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. We have just learned that the president will speak about an hour and a half from now about these terrible events. At least 5 people were shot as a result of the gunman. And I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said an hour and a half. It will be 30 minutes from now that the president speaks. Kevin Corke is at the White House. Kevin, what's the latest?
Hey there, John, you hit the nail on the head. A very active situation, obviously being monitored by the White House since shots rang out shortly after 7 o'clock this morning. We went right up to the press office to find out what, if anything, they had to say about it. And almost immediately, they were in action trying to figure out not only what happened on the ground, but obviously what the response would be. And as you pointed out, the president immediately went to Twitter to talk about his good friend, Steve Scalise. Let me just share some of what the president tweeted today on a day when not just the hearts in Washington, but hearts all over the nation skipped a beat, worried, obviously, about his safety and his health. Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a true friend and patriot, badly injured, but will fully recover. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. And the First Lady, Melania, is also tweeting this morning. She said thank you to the first responders who rushed in to help protect those who were hurt in Alexandria, Virginia. My thoughts and prayers to everyone. And as you pointed out, we did see some visible signs of heightened security here at the White House earlier. 17th and Pennsylvania cleared out. Now, right now, I do see the crowds are actually across Pennsylvania. So you're right. Pennsylvania right now is clear of pedestrian traffic, but they're right over across the street over in Lafayette Park, which frankly is not terribly uncommon. We do see that from time to time. Meanwhile, over on Capitol Hill, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, as was pointed out in the last hour, speaking at the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, had this to say, and I think it really reflects not just what the White House is feeling, but the thoughts of the nation as well.
We were all stunned by the news of the shooting involving your colleague, members of congressional staff, and Capitol Police. Congressman Scalise is a friend of mine. He's a friend and represents many friends of mine back in Louisiana. My prayers and those of my colleagues at the State Department are with the injured and with those members of law enforcement who responded to this morning's attack.
And indeed, big thanks to those who were actually able to get out there and try to protect those who were under assault this morning. And as you pointed out, we expect to hear from the president in about 25 minutes from now. And of course, we'll bring you coverage here as soon as we get that here on Fox News. I should also point out one more thing from here at the White House. The president did have remarks scheduled over at the Labor Department. Those have obviously been scrubbed because of what happened earlier today across the river in Alexandria. John?
Obviously, when something like this happens, there's kind of a security blanket that envelops all of Washington. Exactly. We mentioned that those pedestrians have been pushed away from Pennsylvania Avenue. It is closed to pedestrians at this time. What else are you seeing at the White House in terms of increased security? You know, it's fairly common. Obviously, I come here every day. Early morning, it's usually generally relaxed unless there's a head of state coming here or someone like the vice president, for example, making his way over from the observatory. But I noticed, even in the brevity of my time out here in the last 15 minutes, I'm seeing more assault weapons, quite frankly, and that is uncommon. Usually it's just the guy standing here making sure that people aren't trying to get along the fence line here, but I've actually seen that, and I would say that is an unusual occurrence here. But given what happened over across the river, I don't think it's necessarily a bad posture to take, to be frank. All right, Kevin Corke, if anything changes there at the White House, please get back to us. Kevin Corke, thank you.
Now we're going to go to the scene of the shooting. Fox News has learned that they're continuing to look for information as to what happened, and our Garrett Tenney is live on the scene there. Garrett, what can you tell us?
The police in a joint press.
Well, Heather, it is still very much an active investigation going on. They actually just moved us back from the edge of the outfield there at the baseball field. And this is where almost 4 hours ago, just as this baseball practice was getting underway, they were doing hitting practice. Gunmen began to shoot. We're told from the third baseline outside the fence that the shots began to ring out. The congressmen, they were there on the baseball field. There were about 15 people at a dog park right next door, and there were people at a YMCA just next to the baseball park as well. So this is very much a residential area where all of this was playing out. Police are still piecing together exactly what happened, but from talking to congressmen, we were told that this lasted for 10 or more minutes. Police told us this last hour that they were on the scene within 3 minutes and that they joined Capitol Hill Police. They were here as part of the security detail of House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. They engaged in a gun battle with this gunman. Eventually, they took him down. As we've spoken to people here, it was a scary scene, especially for these folks that were just out walking their dogs. We were told they hit the ground. One man, he described what he heard as he was lying there, hearing this gunfire exchanged.
I couldn't hear the gunman. I heard the police saying to the gunman, I don't know if it's like, get down or put your gun down. And then I heard some of the players saying, just shoot him. Because they shot one of his buddies and they were shooting at them and they were shooting all of us.
And we were told that there are 5 people that were injured in this incident, Steve Scalise, as well as 3 other congressional aides, and then the gunman as well. Still a very much active investigation here on the scene in Alexandria. Heather.
And as we continue to wait for more information, we will bring it to everyone as it comes in. As you said, 5 people being treated. We do know that the suspect as well is in custody. We do not know the condition of that suspect at this point. We're still waiting to hear on that. John?
Republican Congressman Jack Bergman of Michigan was on the field when the shots rang out. He joins us now. Congressman Bergman, set the scene for us. What did you observe? What happened?
Well, it was about just towards the end of the daily practice. I was next in line to bat, standing next to the batting cage when the first shot rang out. The second shot rang out within a couple of seconds. It's pretty obvious at that point we had a shooter. So everybody started to scramble, and we could tell, at least I could tell from my perspective, that it was from somewhere behind the third base dugout. I kicked into my Marine mode, went to a low crawl, crawled behind the first base dugout along with a couple of others, not knowing in which direction the shooter was moving. So after a couple of more minutes, it appeared as though that the shooter was trying to work his way down if you will, the third base line outside of the fence and towards the backstop. So we scrambled then into the first base dugout, and at that point the Capitol Police were engaging him. They engaged him right behind the backstop, and they were the true heroes today, because had they not been there, this truly could have been a massacre.
Yeah, you mentioned your Marine training. You're a retired 3-star Marine Corps general. I imagine that served you well in this circumstance.
Well, it served me well from the standpoint of we are trained to be always situationally aware, maintain your cool as best, and then move forward, and that's what you got to keep doing. So there were a lot of people scrambling, and there was the acts of good human behavior out there on the part of all my colleagues and the staffers. They were all engaged from beginning to end.
What about the response from the protective detail, the Capitol Police? Can you tell us about that?
Well, the only people on site, of course, were Whip Scalise's security detail, and they acted appropriately, with force, with good tactics, and they were able to successfully take the shooter down.
So we are getting an identity of the suspect. If the control room could help me out, that James Hodgkinson is the identity, according to the Associated Press, of the shooter here. There are reports that he spoke to some members who were out there on the field beforehand, before the shooting erupted. Did you happen to hear any of that, or did you happen to see him talking with other members on your team?
I did not. The first time I laid eyes on him was after I was doing a quick check of the wounded, and I saw that he had been subdued by the police. And I walked within about 20 feet just to make sure that they had him secured, and then I turned around and walked back to, again, take care of my comrades.
And in terms of those who were hit, it sounds like perhaps Congressman Scalise, from your observation, was he hurt the worst?
Well, I don't know about the worst, but I was out there as Dr. Winstrup, Congressman Winstrup, and Senator Flack were removing his top of his trousers so they could get eyes on to the entry wound, and just for a couple of seconds I helped him remove his belt, because Dr. Winstrup was the lead medic, if you will, on this mission, and then once we had that, I moved away, but you could clearly see the entrance wound right almost on the left hip bone.
But clearly had his protective detail, Whip Scalise's protective detail, not been there and ready to return fire, this incident would have been a whole lot worse.
It would have been. I mean, we'd have had a choice. We'd either had to, duck and cover and hope he didn't hit us, or basically take the baseball bats and engage him.
There are reports that the shooting began with a long rifle, a long gun, and then he transitioned to a pistol. Is that your impression?
Well, the first sounds, it was a long gun. Once you've heard those sounds once, you know what it is. And when I went over to, if you will, quickly inspect the shooter's situation when he was down on the ground, I saw a automatic pistol that had been emptied against the little building wall right there, like it had been dropped or whatever. But I saw a pistol. I did not see a long gun, but I heard a long gun.
And do you know anything about the condition of the shooter? Because authorities have been very tight-lipped about that. We know he was apprehended. We know he was taken away.
Yeah, I do not know. I do not know. All I know is he was not resisting arrest at that point. He was just laying there and again totally subdued by the officers.
Obviously, as a retired Marine Corps general and a retired pilot for Northwest Airlines, you have handled a lot of emergencies. You have seen a lot of emergency procedures, rehearsals, practices, that kind of thing. Sum it up for us today. What's on your mind after coming away from this terrible event?
Well, what's on my mind is very simply, we live in a world where you have to be eternally vigilant. We learned that on 9/11, especially as an airline pilot. You have to maintain vigilance. There are fact that there are people out there who wish to do harm to others, and it is the responsibility of everyone to maintain their situational awareness. As I think it was Tom Friedman that said a long time ago, if you see something, say something. Well, I think we need to step it up a little bit. Unfortunately, we live in a world that has taken on a new level of security requirements.
Congressman Jack Bergman, Republican of Michigan, it's good for you to spend some time with us today. Thankful you weren't hurt, and thankful you were there with the presence of mind to help out some of your colleagues.
Well, keep those families and those people who were wounded, keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
We will. Thank you, sir.
Amazing to hear the stories of those folks that were all out there helping each other under these circumstances.
To have the presence of mind to do what they did as shots are ringing out.
Remarkable.
It says a lot.
And we're still waiting for the president to speak live. We were told that he would speak around 11:30 Eastern time. So we're waiting on that. We'll bring it to you when we see him. In the meantime, Chad Pergram is our Capitol Hill senior reporter. Chad, you were hearing, we just have some additional information about the suspect himself. His name, we've been told, is James Hodgkinson. And some additional information that I was able to get, I believe it's coming from the Associated Press. He's described as being 66 years old, and that he has one previous charge in April of 2006 of battery and aiding damage to a motor vehicle, but that charge was eventually dismissed, apparently. So that's some new information we have there. What do you have?
Yeah, what we're trying to assess right now are the conditions of those who were injured. Steve Scalise, the Republican whip who was shot in the hip, he was transported via air and still is in surgery at this hour. This is a pretty bizarre scene. You can probably see the baseball field in the distance away from me here. We're on a bridge just about a half to quarter mile away from there. This is a residential area in Alexandria, Virginia, right across the river. I live just a couple of blocks from here. In fact, a few days ago, I was in the coffee shop directly across the street from the baseball diamond, and I was at the gym when I heard this, and I knew that the Republicans were practicing because I had just talked to an aide a couple of days ago about the practice, and in fact, I was asked to come out and watch. I have been out to these practices before to do some feature stories, and they play an actual game, and Congressman Scalise was at second base when he was shot in the hip. This was a dramatic scene here, and if you look up and down the street there, Monroe Avenue is the street. There's a couple of cars across the street from the ball diamond where the windows have been shot out, and here in just about 3 or 4 minutes at the Capitol, there is going to be an all-member briefing about what happened this morning. It's a classified, secure briefing led by Paul Irving, who is the House Sergeant at Arms. He is in charge of security, and we're told that at noon, the House of Representatives, when they formally meet, the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, will address the shooting. Also, the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi. The Senate came in just a little bit ago, and Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, said he was shaken. The Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, also extended his condolences and expressed concern about this. Again, I want to focus, folks, on one thing that is notable, that this is 2 members of the House of Representatives who have been shot in 6.5 years. Gabby Giffords, the former Democratic Congresswoman from Arizona, was shot in the head. There was an aide who was killed, Gabe Zimmerman, who was shot and killed when she was trying to conduct a town hall meeting in January of 2011. You've heard the others talk about the fact that there was the U.S. Capitol Police detail here with Scalise. Because he's in leadership, he gets a certain level of security. The same with the Speaker of the House, the Senate leadership as well. So they were here and they returned fire and engaged the suspect. The Alexandria police chief said that his officers were here in about 3 minutes and they engaged the suspect as well. That suspect was shot and is also at the hospital. But again, a shaking day here on Capitol Hill as members look back. And again, the fact that this congressional baseball game, it's something that members really look forward to. They appreciate the camaraderie on both sides of the aisle. They try hard. They want to win. Kevin Brady, who is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, was injured in a home plate collision a couple of years ago. He was kind of proud of that. This wasn't quite Pete Rose and Ray Fosse in the 1970 All-Star game, but they appreciate that. They play hard. And ironically, it was last year, just about this time, it was the day before the congressional baseball game, that Democrats took over the House floor in their sit-in to protest gun violence. And in fact, Republicans argued that one of the reasons they won the game is because they believed the Democratic members were tired occupying the House floor for more than 24 hours the day before.
Yeah, it's amazing, this regular practice that they have. They go out there at 6:30 in the morning. They're concentrating on playing for this charity baseball game. It's definitely going to make them rethink their security because, as you say, I mean, had it not been for his extra security, there would have possibly been none out there. And we have been told over and over again that the outcome would have been drastically different. Chad, thank you so much, and we'll check back with you.
Anytime.
Bit of good news. We are hearing that one of those who was shot was Zach Barth, a legislative aide to Representative Williams of Texas. We are told that he is receiving medical care, is doing well, and is expected to make a full recovery. That, according to a tweet from the representative's office. Reportedly, he had been shot in the chest, so it sounded a little bit ominous, but apparently that legislative aide to Congressman Williams is going to make a full recovery. So we're about 12 minutes away now from the expected address by the president mentioning all of these terrible events that took place this morning in Alexandria. Senator Rand Paul was in the batting cage and waiting for his turn at the plate when the shooting began. He described the harrowing scene to Fox and Friends.
At this point, the gunman's reloading. There's probably been 50 or 60 shots. We can't really see him that well, but my gut feeling was I've got to decide to stay or run. And at this point, I think he's advancing towards us. People are moving behind different buildings. Most everybody's closer to the gunman than I am. I'm at a distant point. But the staffer that made it over the fence, we were trying to decide to stay or go. And at this point, the Capitol Police began returning fire. I do believe that without the Capitol Hill Police, it would have been a massacre.
Joining us now is Jake Sherman, senior writer for Politico and co-author of Politico's Playbook. All of a sudden, You know, the testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee by the Attorney General yesterday, all of that is yesterday's news when something like this happens, Jake.
Yeah, and I think the stunning thing for many members of Congress, and what people frankly have been talking about since Gabby Giffords was shot, is that most members of Congress do not have security details. I mean, they roam around Washington and around their districts basically on their own, and that's a huge problem, many people feel, because political rhetoric is hot, and some members of Congress, there are protests, there are things of that nature, so that's getting a new discussion right now. And again, we don't know much about this shooting yet, but I could tell you from the people I've spoken to this morning, they kind of feel like, listen, we're walking around all over the place without big security presence, and maybe we should rethink that.
Yeah. This is one of those moments where everybody on Capitol Hill manages to come together. There's been so much partisan rancor lately, and after something like this happens, you know, people tend to throw arms around each other and kind of remember, you know, we're all in this together.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the congressional baseball game, having attended a few of them myself, is one of those vestiges of old school D.C. It's Republicans and Democrats kind of battling it out on the field, having a good time. President Obama attended a few years ago. There were rumors that the president would attend again. So I think this is kind of, it shatters that kind of serene picture that we're used to of, you know, a moment where Washington comes together and Washington has a good time. And I think it's going to alter how these folks practice in the future. A member of Congress told me this morning, a member of Congress on the baseball team, said they've been practicing at this field for years, and that Scalise's security detail was almost just luck that he's a member of leadership. No other police were there, and dozens of members of Congress were practicing out in the open. So this is kind of a moment to reassess and reevaluate, but you're right, people are acting as though they are friends today.
Yeah, because he is a member of the leadership team. He gets Capitol Police protection. And ordinarily, that wouldn't have been the case. There wouldn't have been good guys there to return fire.
That's right, and that's a scary thing to think about, because you had somebody with what appears to be a high-powered gun, members of Congress completely unarmed, playing baseball at 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. Some folks were leaving early to bring their kids to school, so there could have been even more people there. But that's absolutely right. The fact that Scalise's security detail, a small security detail as compared to the Speaker of the House, that was a lifesaver for many members of Congress.
So what happens on Capitol Hill today? We understand that House business has been pretty much canceled.
That's right. House business has been canceled. In about 40 minutes from now, 12 o'clock, Speaker Paul Ryan and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi will take to the floor and offer brief remarks in the wake of this shooting. We are told that Scalise is now out of surgery. The Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, said he's out of surgery and doing well. And at Politico, we're going to have some news shortly. I don't think it's completely sewn up yet, but about another person who was shot in the incident. So I think, listen, there's going to be a lot of developments throughout the day. There's a lot we don't know at this point, but we do know that the Speaker and the House Minority Leader are going to take to the floor in about 40 minutes.
I mentioned the good guys with guns return fire, and we understand that a female member of the Capitol Police was shot, and I don't want to be sexist about this. The good people return fire. So, yeah, again, you mentioned that Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan, who are at loggerheads very often on most every issue, they're going to get together and make kind of a joint appearance in front of the, or at least on the House floor?
Yeah, the House floor, which is kind of just a couple feet from us here, the House opens for the day, kind of gavels in, although it won't be doing any business, it gavels in for the day at noon. And Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi are going to give probably separate remarks. Perhaps they'll stand next to each other, or else they'll stand just feet from each other on the House floor. And they'll give remarks in the wake of this shooting. It's an unusual moment for both leaders to be on the floor for the beginning of floor business for the day, but it does represent kind of the kumbaya moment we're in. Now, the Speaker and the Minority Leader do conduct a lot of maintenance, House maintenance, keeping the place open and running behind the scenes, so it's not terribly unusual. They do have a lot of communication, but a unique day for sure, and that's reflected in this appearance on the House floor.
All right, thanks very much, Jake Sherman from Politico's Playbook. Congressman Joe Barton is speaking right now on Capitol Hill, I believe this is. Let's listen in.
And in doing so, quite probably saved many, many lives. This is a charity baseball game. We've played it for almost 100 years. It's for a very good cause. I can only speak for myself, but I hope we continue the game. It's what, in some ways, what democracy is all about. Yeah.
My first thoughts go to the heroism of the Capitol Police that were there and responded immediately in a manner that likely saved the lives of a number of people, members of Congress as well as the staffers that are out there each morning helping us. I just left one of our other colleagues who we were talking about where we customarily are on the field. He positioned himself in the visitors' dugout, which is across the field, behind it, across the field from where the Capitol Police generally sit. And it's just fortunate because Steve Scalise is a member of leadership. He has a security detail there. Otherwise, we would just be a bunch of guys out on a normal morning practicing. But I think the fact that we practice there every morning, and it's a group of Congress people together, sometimes, Joe, as many as 25 people, maybe 30.
I think we have 22 members there today.
You may have been something in which somebody was able to anticipate our being there and being vulnerable.
Anyway, our prayers are for the people who were wounded, and our thanks are to the police officers who, including the Alexandria police, who arrived very quickly, who attacked. I can't emphasize this enough. They attacked the shooter, and that saved our lives.
And in doing so, got injured themselves. It's remarkable heroism. And
where were the Capitol Police when they first engaged the shooter?
They were out behind the first base dugout where, as Congressman Meehan said, they normally position themselves. They were not on the field. The shooter was not on the field and never got on the field. He stayed behind the third base dugout and came around behind home plate, got behind the utility shed, and then darted out in front of the utility shed, and that's when he got shot.
Did you see the shooter and the weapon?
I did not until after the fact. I was getting down, protecting, making sure my son was down, and I did not see him when it was an active shooting situation.
So we just left Jeff Duncan from South Carolina. Jeff generally plays shortstop or third base, Trent Kelly, and Jeff was leaving with another member, Ron DeSantis, who would have all been positioned in the infield. As is customary, we all have responsibilities to get back to, so sometimes people will finish what they're doing and leave a little early. As Jeff was walking out, he actually saw the shooter, who spoke to him and said, who are those guys? He said, that's the Congressional Baseball Team. He said, what are they, Republicans or Democrats? And he said, they're the Republicans. And that was the conversation he had, and it was only as they were driving
and they said
back
he
that they heard
acted
the
a
news
little
reports.
weird.
Yeah.
When he did. We need to go inside. Thank you.
Thanks.
How long did the firefight go on for?
So that is the first confirmation that we have heard of a conversation that took place on the field. More on that in just a second. I just wanted to mention that President Trump will be speaking in just a couple of minutes from the White House, addressing the nation and the legislative branch about this terrible shooting. But there is the first official confirmation we've heard that the gunman walked up to members of the Republican congressional baseball team who were getting ready for their annual game against the Democrats and said to one of them, who is this out on the field there? It's the congressional baseball team was the answer. Are they Republicans or Democrats? And the answer was given that this is the Republican team, and it was shortly after that he opened fire, wounding two Capitol Hill police officers who are the heroes in this, and wounding a congressional staffer as well as Congressman Steve Scalise, the majority whip for the Republicans in the House of Representatives. Again, because those two Capitol Hill police were there, members of Whip Scalise's security detail, they were able to return fire and, as you heard there, charge at the gunman, essentially, and take him down. We do not know yet what his condition is, but we do know the name, James Hodgkinson. That has been confirmed by Fox News. Yeah. So we're waiting there for the president. He'll be stepping up to the microphone momentarily.
And the suspect apparently 66 years old. You were also mentioning that was Congressman Ron DeSantis, who actually witnessed what we now believe to have been the shooter, who asked whether they were Democrats or Republicans at the time on the field. He did say that the suspect was kind of sauntering about slowly. He also said that there was a white van of some sort involved. So some additional information there.
John Roberts is joining us from the White House right now. John?
As we wait for the president in the next few minutes in the diplomatic reception room, we can tell you that the president has been working the phones busily this morning. He called Congressman Steve Scalise's wife, the congressman's chief of staff, as well as put in phone calls to Speaker Ryan, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and the chief of the Capitol Hill Police Department. The vice president's also been making phone calls this morning, speaking to Speaker Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, the Majority Leader Joe Barton, and the staffer that's the coach that you saw there on television just a little while ago. The immediate effect here at the White House of the shooting this morning was to lock down Pennsylvania Avenue to anybody but pass holders here in the White House complex. It's usually packed with pedestrian traffic. A lot of tourists here in D.C., particularly at this time of year in the 9 o'clock hour. It was reopened a little after 10 o'clock. But it was a scene that we don't usually see here, or one that the last time I saw it actually was on 9/11, when we had uniformed Secret Service officers standing at the intersections carrying automatic rifles. So it showed you that the White House was concerned that this fellow Hodgkinson might not be operating alone, that there might be other people around, but quickly the alert was dialed back and Pennsylvania Avenue filled up full of tourists. The president it's affecting the president's day. He's canceling his event at the Labor Department. The First Lady was supposed to be doing a workplace development event that was open to press. She'll still do that event, but that's now closed to press. And again, we've got the president's statement coming up. Steve Scalise was a familiar figure here at the White House. He was most recently here, by my count, last week when he was here with the leadership to talk about the way forward on tax reform, as well as some of the president's other legislative priorities. The president tweeting out this morning, quote, Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a true friend and patriot who was badly injured but will fully recover. Our thoughts and prayers are with him. The First Lady Melania Trump also tweeting out this morning, quote, thank you to the first responders who rushed in to help protect those who were hurt in Alexandria, Virginia. My thoughts and prayers to everyone. We should also mention here, John, when we see the president, it will be on the occasion of his 71st birthday. It's his birthday today. The president also tweeting out this morning birthday wishes to the U.S. Army, which turns 242 years old today. John?
Yeah, not the way the president would like to celebrate his birthday, I'm sure. But again, the fact that it appears everyone who was a target of this shooting is going to survive, and apparently survive in relatively good condition. Pretty amazing, given what could have happened.
Yeah, when you consider how many shots were fired at that ball field and how vulnerable the players on the field and the batting cages were to rifle fire, it's extraordinary. It's nothing short of a miracle that no one was killed. And thanks to the fast work of the Capitol Hill security detail attached to Congressman Scalise, as Rand Paul said this morning, the senator from Kentucky, it would have been a massacre had they not been there. The outcome would have been completely different.
Yeah. There have been some eloquent words spoken this morning about the need to ratchet down some of the political rhetoric. I wonder if the president will address that. I guess you don't have an advance copy of his remarks.
We don't, not yet. But, you know, we're getting some details on James Hodgkinson, and I don't want to go into any of those yet because they haven't been fully confirmed. But I would expect that politics is probably very much at play here in what happened this morning.
There are indications of that. We're trying to run that down as well from our end. All right, John Roberts, as we await the president there at the White House, in terms of, you mentioned the president is canceling other events today. Does it look like this is likely to be a one-day event, or does this kind of roil the week for official Washington?
Well, I think that it all depends on what the outcome is. The surgery with Congressman Scalise, the two Capitol Hill police officers, and Zach Barth, who is the staffer of Congressman Williams from Texas. It looks like everyone is going to survive. We don't know the condition of the shooter. We assume that he was the fifth person transported to hospital, though we don't have confirmation of that. And we do not yet know the gravity of his wounds either. But if it looks like by the end of the day, everyone is going to pull through just fine, and there's no reason to think, at least when it comes to Congressman Scalise and Zach Barth, that won't be the case. It's quite likely the president could resume his schedule tomorrow. He's got a few big events on the calendar heading toward the end of the week, John, including a trip to Miami, at which he will unveil his new Cuba policy. So, you know, the White House right now has everything on hold. We'll get some word later on today how Congressman Scalise is doing. Apparently a bad injury to the hip, but the hospital he's at has some very, very, very good orthopedic surgeons, and so we'll see how his condition is later today, and that will determine what the president does.
He was conscious when they carried him off the field in the stretcher and even speaking, so that is good news. John Roberts, busy day at the White House, busier than usual. Thank you, John.
And we do have some information, John, as well as about his detail agent, the female detail agent who was injured. She was shot in the foot and is being treated at the same medical center, MedStar Center, where Congressman Scalise is being treated right now.
And again, our hats are off to her. Congressman Jeff Duncan is speaking now on Capitol Hill. We want to listen in.
Team practicing, and he proceeded to shoot Republicans. You take that for what it's worth.
Can you describe why you believe that this was the shooter? Was it because of the description you got from police? Or?
Yeah, based on who I saw, and the description I gave of the Alexandria Police Department fits the picture that is being shown on TV right now.
Do you have a T-shirt on that had any kind of partisan?
What I recognized was a red shirt, reddish. I didn't see anything in his hands, didn't see any partisan stuff on his body, on his clothing. I saw the individual. I know what he asked me. I know how I answered. I know what happened. So I'm making the assumption that he was targeting Republicans based on what he did.
How was his demeanor?
Look, this is an exercise area in Alexandria. There's a YMCA there. We've practiced there for 7 years. I've been in Congress, and there are a lot of citizen activity in the area. They're exercising, they're walking their dogs. It's early morning, 6:30 to 7 o'clock in the morning, so Alexandria is coming alive, and people are exercising, and that's what they do. It's not uncommon for us to have interactions with citizens who look in the fence and watch us practice a little. It's just for 7 years we've had that. So nothing was out of the ordinary for this gentleman coming up and asking me a question.
How much time elapsed between the time you had this
that was at 7:02, and the reason I know that is I got in the car and commented about what time it was, knowing how long it was going to take us to get back to the Capitol. 1 minute, one way or the other, makes a lot of difference in traveling back to the Hill. So I know exactly it was 7:02 when I got there.
How much later would the shooting have been?
You'll have to look that up. I don't know. I got back to the Hill, and it was a little while before I found out about it.
How are you doing yourself? Emma's question from earlier. Do you worry that this is going to be politicized?
I'm sorry?
Do you worry that this is going to become politicized and become
it really depends on how y'all report it and what he says, maybe what his Facebook
Republican
says.
Congressman Jeff Duncan, who spoke to the shooter. Let's listen now to the president.
As you all know, shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Congressman Steve Scalise, a member of House leadership, was shot and badly wounded and is now in stable condition at the hospital, along with two very courageous Capitol police officers. At least two others were also wounded. Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the two Capitol police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims. Congressman Scalise is a friend, and a very good friend. He's a patriot, and he's a fighter. He will recover from this assault. And Steve, I want you to know that you have the prayers not only of the entire city behind you, but of an entire nation and, frankly, the entire world. America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support. Anything she needs, we're with her and with the entire Scalise family. I have also spoken with Chief Matthew Verderosa. He's doing a fantastic job of the Capitol Police to express our sympathies for his wounded officers and to express my admiration for their courage. Our brave Capitol Police perform a challenging job with incredible skill, and their sacrifice makes democracy possible. We also commend the brave first responders from Alexandria Police Fire and Rescue who rushed to the scene. Everyone on that field is a public servant. Our courageous police, our congressional aides who work so tirelessly behind the scenes with enormous devotion, and our dedicated members of Congress who represent our people. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans, that our children deserve to grow up in a nation of safety and peace, and that we are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good. Please take a moment today to cherish those you love and always remember those who serve and keep us safe. God bless them all. God bless you. And God bless America. Thank you.
So the first confirmation there from the president that the shooter has died, a man who went to the Congressional Republican baseball practice. The baseball team, was planning to take on the Democrats tomorrow in a charity baseball game that's been a fixture in Washington for decades. At about 7:09 this morning, he apparently walked up to members of Congress, said, "Who is this?" Was told that it was the Congressional baseball team. He asked if they were Republicans or Democrats. He was told they were Republicans, and shortly after that, shots rang out. We are told that this is the driver's license of the shooter, James Hodgkinson, from Illinois, according to that license. This is the first word we are getting, first picture really that we are getting of the shooter, who, according to the president, is now deceased. Two members of the Capitol Hill police force happened to be there because they are assigned to the security detail of House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Had Congressman Scalise not been there, it is likely there would have been no police presence whatsoever. And these are not just members of the House who were there. Senator Jeff Flake was there. In an official news release from his office, we are told that upon hearing the shots, he took cover in one of the dugouts, and when the shooting stopped, he went out to Congressman Scalise and applied pressure to the bad hip wound. He had been shot in the hip, and then grabbed Congressman Scalise's cell phone and dialed his wife so that he could tell Mrs. Scalise about what had happened to her husband before she heard about it on the media. So a momentous and terrible morning in Washington, but again, things could have been a whole lot worse were it not for the actions of Capitol Hill police officers who were there, took on the gunman, and he is now deceased. Heather?
And we can also confirm, Doug McElway confirmed with the American Society of Home Inspectors that the suspect was a member of the Trade Association of Home Inspectors, but that he dropped out in 2015. So a little bit more information coming in about him. Well, authorities say, as we've been telling you, that House Majority Whip Steve Scalise was shot in the hip, and that could mean a lengthy recovery time. Ohio Congressman Brad Wenstrup is a doctor. He served in Iraq, and he was one of several people to administer first aid to his wounded colleague. And we had some sound from that, but it's really dramatic listening to these people as they describe trying to get to their colleagues and help them. Dr. Peter Rhee is the chief of acute care surgery at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta and senior vice president of Grady Health Systems. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Dr. Rhee, I know that this brings back memories for you. Let's just start immediately with the fact that you were the attending physician when Gabby Giffords was shot. A situation like this where everything is changing by the minute. Talk to us about the timing and how important that is.
That's a very important point. With gunshot wounds, the main issue is the bleeding from the bullet. So you want to get to the surgeon as quickly as you can and be attended to and stop the bleeding on the way if you can. But time is critical.
And that's one of the things that we were going to listen to there at the top of your interview. One of the Congressman Mo Brooks, described some of the scene. He said that, Congressman Scalise, he was over near second base. He heard him scream. I'm quoting now. While all of this is going on, Steve Scalise, our whip, was lying on the ground near the second base position, crawling into right field, leaving a trail of blood. So, what you were just saying, important to try to get to the victim and stop the bleeding first.
Right. When you're there waiting for the vehicle to come and take you away, you need to put direct pressure on the source of bleeding as much as you can and try to stop the blood from coming out of your body. That's what's going to kill you.
And then once you arrive at the hospital, the importance of the team that is put in place and how they handle the situation. We had 5 different victims here, only one of whom was shot, as we've said, in the hip. But there was also a second person taken to MedStar Center. I understand that's a level 1 trauma center. You're very familiar with that. So the team was in place there to treat both of these people immediately.
That's right. I worked at MedStar as well myself in the early part of my career, and they have an excellent trauma team there. The trauma services is about as good as it can get. And they will